Operating an 80,000-pound commercial vehicle at highway speeds leaves zero biological margin for error. A driver's cognitive baseline must be absolute. But the illicit drug market is currently flooded with unregulated chemical threats, specifically engineered to evade standard detection systems. To understand why these compounds evade detection, we have to look at the strict limitations of current testing protocols. Federal regulators schedule and ban illicit substances based on their exact molecular structure. Illicit chemists target this legal parameter. By swapping one side chain or altering a single carbon ring, they produce a novel compound. The altered shape mimics the banned substance's effects, but falls entirely outside the technical letter of the law. A standard testing panel looking for the original structure simply will not detect it. This establishes a perpetual cycle of chemical evasion. A new compound exploits a gap in the law. Regulators eventually identify and ban it, and illicit laboratories immediately synthesize a newer replacement. Passing a standard 5-panel drug test does not prove a driver is free from impairment. Often, it merely confirms that illicit chemistry has temporarily outpaced federal regulation. Ketamine was approved for medical use in 1970 as a fast-acting anesthetic. Because it does not significantly suppress breathing or heart function, it became a critical tool for trauma care and battlefield medicine. Its clinical applications are still expanding today. The FDA recently approved a specific, closely monitored nasal spray formulation called S-ketamine to treat severe, therapy-resistant depression. But running parallel to its medical history is its long-standing presence as a recreational club drug, sought out for its potent dissociative and hallucinogenic effects. Unverified recreational use causes severe physical deterioration. Regular, heavy exposure leads to a documented condition known as ketamine cystitis, resulting in severe, irreversible damage to the bladder and urinary tract. Ketamine does not register on a standard DOT drug test, but the severe physiological damage and dissociative hallucinations it causes completely disqualify an operator from performing safety-sensitive work. Synthetic cannabinoids, commonly sold under names like K2 or Spice, originally bypassed regulators by presenting as herbal incense. Distributors sprayed active chemicals onto plant material and packaged them with transparently deceptive, not for human consumption labels. We must be precise here. Synthetic cannabinoids are not cannabis. They are not a milder or legal version of marijuana. This diagram illustrates the biological reality. These are entirely different classes of chemical compounds, engineered to violently bind to the same neural receptors as THC, but with extreme and volatile intensity. Because illicit manufacturers constantly tweak their formulas to dodge legal bans, the chemical instability varies wildly from batch to batch. This unpredictability results in severe psychotic reactions, including a documented 2010 case where an Iowa teenager died by suicide after exposure. Furthermore, authorities routinely find batches of K2 cross-contaminated with lethal doses of fentanyl, layering an entirely separate physical risk on top of the synthetic cannabinoid. Consuming K2 is not a clever way to bypass a urine test. With zero quality control and constantly shifting formulas, it is a massive biological gamble. One of the most severe emerging threats in the current drug supply is xylazine, a heavy sedative approved by the FDA exclusively for large veterinary animals, including horses. The illicit drug market has weaponized it for basic economic reasons.
Dealers systematically mix xylazine into fentanyl and heroin because the cheap veterinary chemical artificially extends the duration of the high. The vast majority of people consuming these substances have absolutely no idea they are ingesting a sedative engineered for a 1,000-pound animal. This leads to a critical pharmacological failure during an overdose. Because xylazine is a sedative and not an opioid, naloxone medications like Narcan are structurally incompatible and completely fail to reverse its effects. Beyond unreversible comas, xylazine exposure causes a horrific secondary physical reaction, severe skin wounds and necrotic tissue death that can spread far from the injection site, frequently requiring amputation. Workers turning to the unregulated supply chain for a standard illicit high are unknowingly subjecting their bodies to irreversible tissue necrosis. Criminal networks are now mass-producing counterfeit prescription medication at an industrial scale. In a single year, the DEA seized more than 47 million fentanyl-laced counterfeit pills. These pressed tablets are forensically engineered to look identical to legitimate pharmacy-grade oxycodone, Xanax, or Adderall, but visual identicality means absolutely nothing. This scan demonstrates the reality of an illicit laboratory with zero quality control. One pill might contain harmless filler, while the exact next pill pressed on the same machine holds a concentrated, lethal cluster of fentanyl. This complete lack of accountability extends directly into powder forms and other unregulated stimulants, where unpredictable and highly toxic additives are mixed in at random. Because a lethal dose of fentanyl measures roughly the size of 2 grains of salt, this contamination is entirely undetectable by sight, smell, or taste. Consuming any pill or powder obtained outside of a verified pharmacy is a lethal gamble. Believing you are taking a legitimate prescription offers zero biological protection from a fatal overdose. Finally, we must clarify the distinction between medical research and street-level reality regarding psilocybin, the active compound in hallucinogenic mushrooms. The FDA recently fast-tracked clinical research into psilocybin-based treatments for depression. This fast-track status applies exclusively to precise pharmaceutical formulations administered under direct medical supervision, with no full approval expected before 2026. A highly controlled clinical trial is completely detached from the reality of unregulated recreational use. Buying wild mushrooms from an unknown source provides zero verification of species, purity, or chemical potency. Regardless of current research trends, psilocybin remains a Schedule I controlled substance under federal law. Your safety do not mitigate the immediate, severe impairment risks of operating a commercial vehicle under the influence of a hallucinogen today. Ketamine, synthetic cannabinoids, xylazine, counterfeit pills, and psilocybin all share one specific operational trait. None of them will trigger a positive result on a standard DOT 5-panel drug test. The absence of detection is not a loophole. The actual physical dangers of these unlisted substances, from irreversible tissue necrosis to instant fatal overdoses, are significantly greater than the threats screened for on the standard panel. The physics of a moving commercial vehicle demand absolute split-second neurological clarity. The human body cannot manage 80,000 pounds of momentum while battling unverified chemical combinations. Your safety, your judgment, and your career depend on absolute abstinence from unverified substances. The unregulated chemical supply chain answers to no one, and it leaves zero margin for error.